Back on BTN Live, and Big Ten fans have helped make this book, Fourth and Long, The Fight for the Soul of College Football by John Bacon, a New York Times bestseller. It follows the seasons of 4 Big Ten teams from last season: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Northwestern. And we are very pleased to have John Bacon, author of said book, joining us here in studio. He's going to be with us for the next 2 days. So I want to focus first today on the Ohio State-Michigan game. Full disclosure, you are a Michigan grad.
That's worse than that, Dave. I was born and raised I was not raised in the U of M hospital. I was born in the U of M hospital. I live 6 blocks away now, 2 degrees from Michigan, so guilty as charged on all fronts.
That being said, I know you have a very healthy respect for both sides of this rivalry. What makes it, in your mind, the best rivalry in sports?
A few things, Dave. One thing is, in college football generally, I believe the rivalries are the best in all of sports around the world, because it's not just this team versus this team. It's this school versus this school. It's this state versus this state. In the NFL, the players are literally drafted as you are in the military. I guarantee you on Saturday, about 95% of the guys in that field will have been recruited by both schools and made an active choice to be either Wolverines or Buckeyes. And trust me, they made them for particular reasons, and they'll usually tell you what those reasons were. So whatever those reasons were, they're very passionate about them. And look, Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State, or Northwestern, they're not going to move to Nashville for a better stadium. All right, you can count on these places. They've been around for over 100 years. This rivalry goes back to 1897. I'm sorry, the Jets and the Giants just don't do that. And of course, since 1918, when both teams are finally in the Big Ten, the record between them is 46 wins for Michigan, 44 for Ohio State, and 4 ties. That, my friend, is a rivalry.
That is a pretty even one at that. So as you look at these two schools, and you spent some time with each program, you certainly know both of them well, how do you compare the two universities and the two programs?
The two universities, of course, are actually quite similar, except when you ask alums of either school. The differences become very obvious at that point, very distinct. But Michigan obviously is an excellent school. Granted, I'm biased about that. But Ohio State, you have to give your due here. In the book, we do. I talked to former Michigan president James Duderstadt, who says, look, man, they used to be not in the top half of the Big Ten academically. Now they're top 3 or 4 and moving up with a bullet. They got a $2.5 billion campaign right now for the school. U.S. News & World Report called it the 18th best public university in the United States, number 1 in the state of Ohio. We used to always make jokes, of course, in Ann Arbor about the Ohio State University. Well, doggone it, it probably is the Ohio State University. And let me make that worse, by the way. As an Ann Arbor guy, born and raised, as I said, the man who single-handedly ruined my childhood is Archie Griffin. The first 4 Michigan-Ohio State games I saw were 72, 3, 4, and 5. All 4 games. Michigan was undefeated, ranked in the top 4. And, of course, what do you get out of that? 3 losses and a tie. Why? Archie Griffin. And it gets worse, Dave. When you meet him as an adult and interview him for 90 minutes, and he was just fantastic. He's the driving force behind that $2.5 billion, one of them, certainly, that campaign. You meet him and you realize, and I know you know him very well.
Unbelievable guy.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
You realize within 5 minutes, he represents everything I love and admire about college football. Now you've ruined my adulthood.
After ruining the childhood. So you talked about in your youth that Ohio State was dominating this series. There was, of course, a run where Michigan dominated it subsequent to that, but now Ohio State is dominating again. How does Michigan get back to being at the point where Ohio State is now?
There is no solution other than winning. Now, that starts with recruits, of course, and Brady Hoke has done a fantastic job, as you know, with a couple consecutive top 5 recruiting classes. You can't do that at Michigan, I don't think, without recruiting some of the best players out of the state of Ohio. They do have better high school football. You can't ignore that. I will say this for all the guys that go back 40 years, including the tiebreaker show that came on, of course, last week. Fantastic job they did. Anybody who leaves the state of Ohio that Ohio State really wants and goes to Ann Arbor, you better understand that is a one-way street. You ain't coming back the way you came. And as Desmond Howard said, if you win, they'll say screw you. If you lose, it has to be worse. You better have some rings when you return to Mazatlan or Canton or one of those towns. And that also fuels this rivalry because the feelings, they have made active choices on both sides to go to those schools, and that never changes. In the NBA, they tried to sell us a few years ago on the resurrection of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry. They're both in the finals again. It's Kobe versus Garnett. We didn't buy it. It's not Bird versus Magic. The NBA, the NFL, tends to be based on personalities, not this rivalry. In '95, when they're undefeated, of course, and you got Eddie George, the Heisman Trophy winner. Michigan will play spoiler. Of course, Ohio State has played spoiler, and then they've just run the table here of late. But where the players come and go, even the coaches come and go, the cultures between them do not change, and so the rivalry to me is always rich.
Let me ask you this question. Speaking of rich, your previous book was 3 and Out about the Rich Rodriguez era gone wrong at Michigan. That, of course, was, as the name implies, the title implies, 3 years.
I hate to ruin the ending for you, but the title is 3 and Out.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we all know how it went down. This is year 3 under Brady Hoke. Again, this has not gone as well as Michigan fans had hoped. I think this was a year where we certainly thought, after going to training camp, this was a team that had a great chance to win the division. It hasn't worked out that way. How does Brady Hoke avoid the same fate of Rich Rodriguez? How would you compare what's going on inside the Michigan program now with what you saw then?
There are obviously a lot of differences. Brady Hoke nailed it at his first press conference, said, this is Michigan for God's sakes, and everyone's on board right away. And that was not the case, of course, with Rich Rodriguez, who was an outsider. He recruited right away. He went 11-2 right away. So his honeymoon was as happy as Rich's was unhappy, really. So that was, the two polar opposites right there. Also, of course, Brady Hoke started right away with a fantastic defense. Rich, of course, defense was the problem. Now, of course, with Brady Hoke, offense is the problem. Defense is looking pretty good. So many differences in so many ways. However, as we enter the Ohio State game in year 3, the pressure, it seems to me, to be about the same. I don't think any rational person is calling for Brady Hoke's head at this point, and should not be, in my opinion. But you're already hearing some stirrings, and you're hearing about recruits making decisions based on this. Man, the pressure gets real, and I will say, for the huge salaries, being around Rich Rodriguez, being around Bill O'Brien last season at Penn State, Urban Meyer, man, I would not trade with any of these guys, honestly. It's a pressure like no other.
Multiple-time New York Times bestselling author John Bacon. 4th and Long is the book, available in bookstores everywhere. I just like that phrase. And, of course, on Amazon.
Get used to it for yours, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Everywhere else. John Bacon will join us again tomorrow. We'll take a bigger picture look at the Big Ten, talk a little bit more about some of the other schools he was with as well, Penn State and Northwestern. But, John, thanks a lot, and, of course, enjoy the game this weekend.
Dave, thank you.